Well, welcome everybody to the first Catalogue of Life session. There's going to be another one tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'm Markus Döring from GBIF, working for Catalogue of Life since a few years. And I'd like to thank our diamond sponsors for supporting Tdwg and our activities. There is, as you probably already know, a Zoom chat that we will use for questions during the session. And there's another one in the Oxford abstracts where you can register for the SYM11 group, and then we can have some continued discussions if you like, or overnight for tomorrow's session to catch up with other things. Then hopefully there should be all presenters online. There's mostly recordings, I'm afraid, but Olaf Banki is going to start this block with his presentation live.
Okay, good morning or good day. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thanks very much and welcome to this session. And my sincere apologies that I'm not there in Okinawa. I am presenting today also on behalf of Joe Miller from the Global Species or Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And unfortunately, he's also not present in Okinawa. We have two sessions, one today, one tomorrow, and we would like to concentrate and show you something on our progress that we are doing together of Catalogue of Life and GBIF, but also showing you several examples of how taxonomic data services are being used by different user categories, from data custodians up to research infrastructures and up to citizen science and policy. So the collaboration between GBIF and Catalogue of Life actually has a long history. Already in the original papers where a global biodiversity information facility was described in 1999, a Catalogue of Life of known, a Catalogue of names of known organisms was mentioned. And back in when GBIF really originated in 2001, that collaboration continued onwards. Now in 2017, that collaboration actually got more intense when GBIF and Catalogue of Life started to build the checklist bank infrastructure. This is an open data, open access taxonomic data publishing platform. It is core infrastructure to both GBIF and Catalogue of Life and is recognized as a global core biodata resource. Now, Checklist Bank holds tooling for importing species lists, for comparing these lists, or for building these lists. So, for example, all tooling to build a monthly and annual Catalogue of Life is present in Checklist Bank. What you can also find is all taxonomic data that are published to GBIF or Catalogue of Life is also available in Checklist Bank. Versioning or different versionings of the monthly and annual releases of Catalogue of Life can be found, but other data sources can also be found, like national or thematic species list, or even policy relevant species lists. Now, the vast majority of data sources in Checklist Bank originate from digitized scientific papers. For example, liberated through initiatives like Platzi, Pensoft Publishers, and the European Journal on Taxonomy. This is very, very valuable information that we can mine and integrate into the Catalogue of Life. Now, we are also looking towards harmonizing with molecular names data, for example, from the Unite community or from Barcode of Life, BOLT systems, or NCBI taxonomy, or the European Nucleotide Archive as some examples. Nomenclatural data can also be found in Checklist Bank. And in some cases, you can actually link through to the original described source in some of these nomenclatural data bases, like, for example, IPNI, Zoobank, or Bryonames, to give you some examples. Now, we're only tracking the use of Checklist Bank for a few years. It's been launched at the end of 2020. And I can only show you front-end usage at this point in time, although the API is much more, the usage of the API is much more encompassing. So over 2 years, we have about 12,000 users through the front end. Most of the usage is actually around the Catalogue of Life itself, but we're starting to see that more and more other checklist or other data sources within Checklist Bank are being used. Now, the coverage is well across the entire globe. The top 3 countries that have most usage are China, USA, and Brazil. And if you look at the continents, then it's mostly usage in Asia and Europe and in the Americas, a little or rather low figures in Africa and Oceania or Pacific. Now, you can register in Checklist Bank as a user through a GBIF account. If you register, you can actually do slightly more things and access more tooling. So it's really recommended. And up till now, we have about 1,280 registered users, and this amount is growing every month. We also track the amount of files or the number of files that are prepared for download. And since May 2021, there's slightly above 7,000 files prepared for download, and we can track in which format this data is being downloaded. And the most usage is in the format starting for archive and Catalogue of Life data package. Now, taxonomic data services are really important in various domains. It's not only for the scientific domain, but it stretches into nature conservation, but also legislation, as we will see this morning, or sorry, this day, it's my morning, and ventures into domains like healthcare. So in the end, trust in taxonomic data is really key. In case we provide wrong information, this could even have legal implications in some cases. And so what we are looking for as Catalogue of Life, together with all our partners and data custodians, is how we can get to a far better and more transparent quality assurance and control mechanisms. Because that's actually what we need. We need to understand and know, I would say, digital information out there. Now, Catalogue of Life has been in operation since it's in its 28th year. And traditionally, it has been built from about 164 global data sources. This culminates up to 2.1, 2.2 million accepted species. This network is underpinned by at least 500 data custodians. But we know that through our closest partners like ITIS, WORMS, TaxonWorks, FADA, World Flora Online, Catalogue of Life China, as some examples, that far more people are actually involved in this, and we're trying to acknowledge each one of them. Now, if you look at this map, you can see that the distribution of these contributors actually follows the large natural history collections. So we still have a challenge that we have a lot of gaps across the world. Now, if we look at the amount of scientific publications in which Catalogue of Life is being mentioned, this number is growing. It has a volume of about 10,000 scientific papers, but we need to scrutinize the data a little bit more. Now, part of our progress now with GBIF is that GBIF mediates about 3 billion species occurrence records and need to represent them taxonomically so they become searchable and you can pose questions to that database. So we're trying to implement a new process together with GBIF in building what we call a Catalogue of Life extended release that will not only be built of 164 data sources, but will be built of other data sources as well, like these scientific papers that I showed, other regional or global lists, and also data from molecular names. So tomorrow, my colleagues Marcus, Diana, and Camilla will show you our progress in this area. So what's our vision together? Our vision is that we would like to see that all major biodiversity data initiatives and infrastructures really start revolving around a common and shared taxonomic service. We've seen and know from almost 30 years of experience that it takes a long time to build infrastructure, and to maintain it, you really need to have stability in terms of human resourcing, funding, and also in your data infrastructure services. And we believe that it's about time that we start to work far more closer together in achieving this vision. So the intent of this session today is actually to show you a couple of ways of how Catalogue of Life is being used by different partners, and also tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I suggest we just hear Donald's presentation about the taxonomic group right now, and then have some time for both to
Perfect.
raise questions. Because so if we could start the presentation from Donald about the taxonomy group in Catalogue of Life. Yeah, sure. If it's a short, we're a bit late, but yeah, go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe you, you then, we know the, how to say, previously, we know the Catalogue Life Plus project is maybe conducted. So could you tell me the differences between the Catalogue Core Plus, COL Plus to the COL Extended? Is it almost same project or not? Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, Col Plus was a particular project that ran about 3 years. But yes, it's the same idea that we already were pushing during that project. So the product name will be Catalogue of Life, and we have a base release indicating the global data sources, so the 164 global data sources that we build off the Catalogue of Life. And we have the extended release where we will be extending that information with other information. Tomorrow, in the next session, this process will be explained during 3 presentations. But, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Donald Hoban, the chair of the Catalogue of Life Taxonomy Group, and I want to give some background today on the work of the Taxonomy Group and some of the current efforts to increase the transparency of its efforts and the quality of Catalogue of Life as a whole. Catalogue of Life itself is clearly a response to a quarter of a millennium of taxonomic effort. It aims to organize the outputs of all of this effort to provide well-organized digital classifications and species lists that can support the needs of all users on the web and more widely. And to do so, it aims to work with taxonomists to mobilize their expert knowledge as suitable data sets and to bring them all together to represent the best possible consensus for current taxonomic opinion on the naming and classification of species. Along the way, we also have to address some of the shortfalls that remain in the mobilization of the fundamental data on the names that have been applied to species. The challenges for Catalogue of Life in this work are that for many taxa, there are few taxonomists who have been working on species lists, and even those that have may not have the skills to produce them in high-quality digital formats. Well-studied taxa, such as the vertebrate groups, may have multiple lists with competing perspectives, which presents a completely different set of challenges. And for us to identify the best resources and deal with all of the questions that may relate to the quality, the coverage, and the completeness of each data set also requires some taxonomic understanding and skill. And therefore, the work of Catalogue of Life itself is calling on the time and the energies of many of the same people who are already overloaded with all of their work in describing species. Just one example with which I'm very familiar, the moths and butterflies, Lepidoptera. Catalogue of Life has for a long time sourced its classification for this group from a data set that was produced by the Natural History Museum from its card index called LEPindex. This included about 150,000 species, but cut off somewhere around 1990. And since the cards were not developed with the intention of producing a high quality species classification, they're very variable in terms of the names and how recent any effort went into organizing the information on the cards. My estimate would be that that list was missing about a quarter of the world's moth and butterfly species. And even with massive amounts of time spent working on a newer version of this data set in Taxon Works, it's still clear that very large sections of this list are out of date or incomplete, and that probably many more thousands of hours would need to be applied following the kind of processes we've taken up to this point, even to get close to having a modern and comprehensive checklist of the world's moths and butterflies. And there are many reasons, some of them listed here, why this is a problem. And in particular, the most charismatic and well-known of this group, the butterflies themselves, have been receiving so much new taxonomic effort, description of new species in recent decades, that it's impossible for even one or two people to keep up with this, as well as dealing with all of the rest of the moths. So much work there, and this is not unusual for some of the more major taxonomic groups. We're lacking a trustworthy and complete list. The Catalogue of Life Taxonomy Group exists to assist Catalogue of Life as a whole with the processes for managing, bringing together the data sets to build the checklist itself, and dealing with some of the taxonomic challenges and questions that may arise along the way. We have an international membership, a spread of taxonomic interests, and generally meet once a month to discuss ongoing cases and challenges and potential new data sets that may enhance the Catalogue of Life. One process that we've introduced in the last couple of years is to become much more formal about a review process for any new data set or significantly updated data set that might be brought in as a section within the Catalogue of Life. The example here that you can see includes some of the comparisons that were made at the time that we brought the online taxonomic facility of Geometridae, the geometrid moths, into Catalogue of Life to replace the relevant section from the Global Lepidoptera Index, which is the most recent version of LepIndex that I was talking about earlier. And as you can see, we've been trying to make comparisons both in terms of the comprehensiveness and coverage of the data sets, but also regarding some of the governance factors that may affect the overall quality of the data for most users. The Catalogue of Life taxonomy group has also been shifting to introduce a number of subgroups to deal with some of the more major and ongoing challenge areas. We recognized that these monthly meetings I was talking about earlier were largely taken up with questions that related to insects and to vertebrates, and for very different reasons in the two cases. And few of the members of the taxonomy group had interest or particular competence with both of these groups, and therefore it made more sense to try to break some of these tasks out and to experiment with a model that could make it easier for us to spawn new subgroups to address other challenges as they arise. So the vertebrate subgroup, which has been chaired this year by myself and by Stephen Garnett from Charles Darwin University, is looking at the state of our coverage for the vertebrates. In general, quite clearly, Catalogue of Life includes the names and suitable classification for most vertebrate species, but the amount of work that goes on to revise these species, to understand the boundaries between species in different regions, and changing the number of species understood to be in each genus, and also carrying out generic revisions, means that there is a lot of variability in the different sources that are accessible on the web, and Catalogue of Life itself has become somewhat outdated in its presentation of several of these groups. And for this reason, the vertebrate subgroup has been focusing on understanding the work that's going on more widely, such as the working group on avian checklists, and trying to find the most optimal ways to ensure that the excellent work that several of these groups are putting into developing lists for their own purposes can become more accessible and replace potentially aging sections of Catalogue of Life itself. In the case of insects, the challenges are very different, that we have massive hyperspeciose taxa and enormous gaps, no complete coverage of any of these, too few workers and too little automation. And for this reason, this working group is focusing particularly on considering how to start at a much more basic level in at least gathering together as many of the published names as possible and building up with more automated processes, subsequently with human review, in order to fill out these really major groups. We're also expecting shortly to spawn another subgroup that will focus on the higher classification of the Catalogue of Life. We've relied for a long time on somewhat ad hoc processes to bring in changes to the higher classification. In the past, there have been papers such as Ruggiero et al. From 2015 that have provided comprehensive views, but these haven't necessarily themselves made it into Catalogue of Life. And there are particular challenges here that our subgroup would need to consider, particularly around how we balance stability with the most recent phylogenetic understanding. Catalogue of Life needs to avoid being in constant turmoil, but it is important that equally we do not reflect outdated concepts for some of these taxonomic groups. So lastly, I just want to emphasize that I'm Catalogue of Life itself is really interested to hear from any who are interested in contributing to any of these tasks. The taxonomy group itself certainly needs more participants. Most members are already heavily overcommitted and unable to spend as much time as this group deserves. And also, as I think will be discussed elsewhere in this symposium, Catalogue of Life is moving towards exploring new models for filling out gaps and dealing with the curation of sections of the Catalogue of Life, particularly semi-automated processes that may bring in names from other trusted sources. And we do need to work with knowledgeable and interested experts and communities to oversee and improve these processes. Thank you for your time and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Donald. We have a few minutes for questions, and if you can bring up Olaf, maybe, to answer mostly, because he's representing Donald here. If there are questions in the room, or I don't know. Anything online? No. Then we'll just wait a few minutes until we hear from Claire Johnson, also from Australia, about the governance. So she's working with Stephen Garnett on the governance model for Catalogue of Life in 2 minutes. There's a question. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's.
So Mike is asking online, how can people report gaps in Catalogue of Life? Did you hear me, Olaf? Or should I read the question again?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I heard it. That's a really good question. First of all, we realized that we need to do more work to show where the gaps are, in fact. But so that's a step that we are, I would say, planning to do, is show online better where the particular gaps are. But you can always, one way of doing this is people knock on our door, mostly through email, but sometimes through GitHub, for example. And they tell us where a particular gap is. And so recently somebody is saying they have a particular data set for a particular genus. And with this new process, with extending the Catalogue of Life with other data sources, we are better able to respond to questions like that, can publish that data set to Checklist Bank, and then integrate it into the Catalogue of Life. So there are various ways you can do this. You can send emails or get attached to our GitHub repository and place suggestions there.
If I can add on, we have a Catalogue of Life organization in GitHub, and there's a data repository where we do all kinds of data issues. And if you want, there's a request, a new data source or something, there's a pre-prepared issue tracking things. So even if you don't own the data yourself, but you are aware of some source that might be useful for us that we should look into, try to get a hold of in some way, you can leave an issue there, or as Olaf said, just the support email always works, of course, as well. Well, it's time to go to the next presentation, I think. So, Claire Johnston about governance.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me here to do this presentation with you all today. I would have loved to be there in person. However, that didn't happen. So today, this presentation comes to you all the way from Darwin, Australia. My name's Claire Johnston, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Catalogue of Life list governance community. And I wanted to talk to you today about a topic that doesn't get a lot of attention, at least not in this field, and not until quite recently. And that's governance, or governance of taxonomic lists to be specific. Hopefully you're not already yawning. I do understand that it can be a little bit dry at times, but it's also really important. So what is governance? What do I mean when I'm talking about governance? So I'm referring to the rules that we put in place to ensure the harmonious organisation and management within pretty much all groups of individuals that are working together towards a shared goal or a collective cause. In our case, taxonomic list governance. These rules not only provide a framework and direction, but they also ensure everyone involved knows what their expectations are and is hopefully on the same page about where they are going, what they are doing, and why. So what does governance have to do with taxonomy, you may be asking? To answer this question, we need to go back in time, back to 2017 to be precise, where a paper by Stephen Garnett and Les Christidis appeared in Nature that turned out to be a little bit controversial. Not unsurprising, given its title, Taxonomy Anarchy Hampers Conservation. The response to this paper, and the good-natured conversation that followed, although lively at times, was also the catalyst for some really important discussions. And the reason the discussions became lively was because so many of you here today, and the wider taxonomic community, deeply care about this subject. Thankfully, after some discussion, everyone involved in this debate was able to work together to address the issues raised, and more importantly, come up with solutions that everyone was happy with and provide some clear direction for the future. The first of this was the development of 10 principles for creating a single global authoritative list of the world's life forms. I've listed these 10 principles here. However, I'm not going to go into this in any more detail. I only have 10 minutes to share with you today, but this has been published as a paper. Following on, a series of papers were published under the collective heading towards a global list of accepted species. And these 6 papers highlighted the current issues within taxonomy, the consequences of these issues, how we might overcome them, and what would be needed for the creation of a single global taxonomic species list. These were all published in 2021 in the Journal of Organisms, Diversity and Evolution. From here, a survey of the taxonomic community was undertaken to identify what the broader community felt the issues were, how they wanted to address them, and what they felt was most important. Over 1,000 taxonomists and users of taxonomic lists were surveyed. We had a high response rate, and a large number of these were really supportive of the creation of a global species list and governance oversight for that list. As you can see, there was a lot of support for the creation of a global species list. And the responses among taxonomists, scientists, and users of taxonomic data were all quite similar. Very few were explicitly against a unified global list, and the overall support was quite high. There was also agreement that a formal oversight body was needed. However, there was less consensus on what would be the best form for this governance to take. We're currently researching different options for what an oversight body might look like. To do this, we've been researching the governance systems of global scientific organisations and developing best practice design principles for governing scientific knowledge commons. From this research, we'll put together recommendations for the Global Taxonomic List Oversight Body. These again will be presented to you and the wider taxonomic community to review and provide comments, suggestions, and feedback. Developing guidelines for the governance oversight body is only one part of what we're doing. We're also working with the taxonomic community on something that I'm really excited about and that we're hopeful will have a meaningful impact on taxonomy and the quality of the taxonomic lists that underpin so many decision-making processes. What we've done is developed a set of list contents and list governance indicators to assess the quality of taxonomic lists, as well as introduce effective, accessible, and relevant quality measurement tools for inclusion in the global species list. So there are 2 papers currently under review with Bioscience, and we're hoping they'll be published soon. This, however, is really only the first step and by no means the last. We actually need your help moving forward. So we had 4 aims with developing these indicators. The first was to allow list creators a tool to assess the strengths and weaknesses of their list, to provide list users with a transparent and largely objective measure of list quality, to help the Catalogue of Life decide whether to adopt a list, especially where there are competing treatments, and also to allow for the measurement of trends and patterns in list quality, both across taxa and over time. As part of the development process, these metrics have been applied to a variety of taxonomic lists. Assessments took about an hour to get through both the contents and governance metrics for each list. However, this process also included discussion around the indicators and the refinement and revision of their wording. List assessments took place as interviews with either the creator of the list or someone with an intimate knowledge of the list and its creation. We did this so we could explain what we were hoping to capture with each indicator and the reason behind it, as well as provide any additional explanations and, importantly, collect feedback so we could improve the metrics as we went. We're hopeful they are now self-explanatory and that all the needed information is there to make the process a lot quicker, so long as the person undertaking the assessment has an intimate understanding of the list being assessed. There are 12 governance indicators and 24 contents indicators, although currently 4 of these are considered desirable but not necessarily essential. And this is where we need your help. These metrics are not being published as our final goal. Our aim is to get through the peer review process so we can publish the metrics and they can be distributed to the larger taxonomic community, so that you and they can assess their validity by applying them to their own lists. We want your feedback and suggestions so that together we can create an accepted and useful tool that reflects the needs and wants of the taxonomic community. They are still a work in progress, but we are hopeful they can become an essential step in the process to be considered for inclusion in the global species list. Lists receive a score for each indicator that is then weighted based on what was identified as being most important to taxonomists initially surveyed. These scores are then aggregated to provide each list with a single governance score and a single content score. So what happens next? As I mentioned, we want to consult further on the indicators once published to refine their wording and determine which characteristics are most important to the community. We will also be testing our ideas and seeking feedback for the list governance oversight body. A review has been organised of the Catalogue of Life to determine its suitability for international multilateral environmental agencies. We are also hopeful this work will contribute to appeals for additional taxonomic funding on the basis of improved governance for taxonomic lists and the development of a unified single list of the world's life forms. Hopefully that wasn't too much or not enough information. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed hearing what I had to say. I've listed my email address here, and I would love to hear from you if you have any questions or feedback, or if you'd like to get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out. I also need to mention that support for the research has been provided by an Australian Research Council grant. Thank you so much again for your time. And I guess that brings us to any questions.
Well, Claire is online. In case there are questions, we have a few minutes. Anything? No, not in space. Well, then, I don't know. We have a few more minutes to, if anyone is into joke. Oh, well, there's another one.
So I think exciting presentation and contents. I'm wondering, how do you relate your work to the commons principle? So in your abstract, you were talking about global commons, concept developed by Eleanor Ostrom. I don't know. Yeah, so I would be interested how that relates to what you're doing.
Personally, I can't answer, but Claire is she? If you could put her on there. Yeah. Hi, Claire.
Great question. So Ostrom's design principles won her have won her a lot of prizes. They're really well known. They've been applied really broadly across a whole number of different commons. So they were designed initially for natural resources, and then they have been modified, I guess, for knowledge commons. So we started looking at how the design principles could be utilized to provide a framework for us looking at scientific commons as a global commons. We've kind of expanded from there a little bit since then, and we're looking at other not-for-profit governance frameworks as well at the moment. And I don't know, Stephen, did you want to add?
It's Stephen Garnett here. I'm part of the work with Claire.
One of my colleagues.
So one can think of scientific knowledge as being a commons, and that the principles of managing the common property that Ostrom developed could apply to taxonomic lists. It's, as Claire says, almost since we prepared this talk, we've now started to expand our investigation into a whole range of non-government organization governance that is also providing ideas, so that the model we present eventually we will provide inputs from both the Ostrom's work, but also the broader governance literature.
Yeah, I think we're going to try and kind of marry the two, because we're looking at the governance of the scientific commons, but also managing the people that are then, or providing a framework for the people that are managing that knowledge commons. So it's a little bit of both.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire. We'll switch to the next presentation from Colin in Beijing about the Catalogue of Life China.
Hello, everyone. My topic is about progress and application of Catalogue of Life China. My name is Colin. and I come from the Institute of Zoology. This is my outline, and firstly, I want to introduce some backgrounds about Catalogue of Life China. As we know, the purpose of taxonomy research is to describe, document, and inventory the world's biodiversity. And Chinese scientists have spent more than 100 years to inventory species, to answer what and how many species we have, and have published many monographs for animal, plant, and fungi. As we know, taxonomy is a science we advance with times because new species are discovered and because taxonomy systems are changing. So to build a comprehensive and accurate and dynamic nationwide species checklist is necessary to accommodate to changing taxonomy. On the other hand, species checklists are often served as backbones for indexing biodiversity data, and this data with AI can help many biodiversity researchers. Furthermore, the CBD Global Biodiversity Framework said we should ensure that the best available data, information, and knowledge for decision makers, for the public, and biodiversity conservation strategy and action plan of China has clearly proposed the target of updating national species checklist annually. And maybe we can get more support from the government. China joined the Species 2000 as one of its regional nodes in 2006 to start its national species checklist, Catalogue of Life China. And the goal is to collect a uniform and validated index for Chinese known species and provide the checklist annually for global access to biodiversity knowledge of China. We released the first version of COL China in 2008, and now in 2024, we released the 17th version. This is the first image for each annual version. And this image shows the increasing numbers of species for each year. And now that we get more than 155 species and infer species in 2024 version. This image shows the statistics by kingdoms, and we can see that animals have the largest numbers, and then the plant, and then the fungi in COL China now, and 6,423 species are newly added into 2024 version, including more than 4,000 species for animal and more than 2,000 species for fungi and more than 300 species for the plant. And these images show the distribution of species, Chinese species at the province level. The first one is for all the species, and the second one is for animal. And then for the plant, and finally for the fungi. we can see the hotspots of biodiversity of China from the Syria China data. And this year we have made a progress for extracting Chinese species from global catalogue of life, and we find nearly 51,000 accepted names, both in CLL and CLL China, and then we find a family, the whole family, that is not included in CLL China. The family is about the stick insect, and then we get 197 species from CLL in this family to fill the gaps of CLL China. Yeah, this is a big progress. And there are still some problems. First one is incongruent classification systems. So we should be careful if we want to get the species data from CLL for building local checklist. And the second one is some taxa group has no detailed distribution information, so we cannot get species in data from this taxa group for China, and there has no convenient way for extracting species from catalogue of life for China, for example. And so we have to import the whole database of CLL and then compare with CLL China to extract the species data for China. And fortunately, more and more volunteers contact and join us to fill the gaps of CLL China now. And this is a good example this year. This person contacted us, said he can fill the gaps about the snail, and so we created WeChat work group online, and we work online to fill the gap finally, and it's excellent for fill the gap of CLL China. There are some application cases for CLL China, and there are 3 ways people can access to CLL China. The first one is to visit the website, and the second one to download a standalone app, and it can work offline. And then there are some APIs for services. There are many citations, more than 1,200 times in different publications, and it has been visited over 50 million times online. And CLL China has served as backbones for many biodiversity databases in China. It also adopted and recommended by government department as scientific databases, and as an important action for CBD announced by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Furthermore, CLL China also helped the local government to build their own checklist for protect their biodiversity. This is an example this year for build the Mingyun County checklist. Next step The first task is to fill the gaps of CLL China, and we want to continue extracting Chinese species from global CLL and find the next taxa group to fill our CLL China. And the other one is about knowledge graph of taxa. Large language model brings the chances for tracking and linking different taxa or to build the knowledge graph of taxonomy. So this is another important task for our job in the next step. That's all. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.
Thank you. If you have any questions, we have a few minutes, the online. Yeah.
Thank you, Colin. Olaf is asking, the distribution data provided by data custodians to Catalogue of Life varies in quality and is sometimes absent. To what extent would it help if we match Catalogue of Life names usage to GBIF occurrences? Would it help Catalogue of Life China?
Sorry, can you say again?
Yes, sorry, I went away from the microphone, but I will repeat. The distribution data provided by data custodians to Catalogue of Life varies in quality and is sometimes absent. So to what extent would it help if we match Catalogue of Life name usage to GBIF occurrences? Would it help Catalogue of Life China?
Yeah. It would be helpful for CLL China. And in fact, now there are many gaps in CLL China. We are intending data sources. So this time we extract Chinese species from global CLL, and we are trying to get more names or classifications from other data sources, just like you said, the GBIF. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I might catch up on this one because there was an idea I had before that we use GBIF occurrences and we do monthly releases with the Catalogue of Life in addition to the annual ones. If we would process all the occurrences in GBIF and get a distinct list of the distributions, basically, that we can have distribution records, ranges for countries or even sub regions that we could then, the people know it's derived from GBIF, so it's not necessarily perfect, but at least it is some way to produce regional lists, because that's a very frequent request we've seen in Catalogue of Life, that many people ask, I need a national list, I need a list for that area or something, but we do not have reliable distribution data that we can filter species. So that is an idea we're having in mind, and is rather straightforward to do, I think.
So, Marcus, many data providers have distribution data in their catalogs.
Yes.
You just have to start accepting it.
Well, we do accept them all the time.
Well, you don't normalize, you don't accept normalized text. You just accept it as a text string.
No, that's not true. We accept all kinds of things, but we get.
Okay, maybe I'm.
If you have it, then we can improve it. We do structured distributions, but many people just provide text, and there even you don't know if it's complete. You never know if this is really the whole range of a species or if it's just So we haven't put much effort on the whole distribution problem, but it's a big issue to really get it up to high quality. So an alternative, we can, I guess, have both things as long as you know where it's coming from. Yeah.
Andreas Müller from Berlin Botanical Garden. Just to come back to the former question and or how to or if it's possible to use the GBIF occurrence data, we did do some research on this for the Worldflower Online actually, and I think, as far as I remember, the result was that it was refused because there was just much too much distribution data that was incorrect. Like you have so many occurrences that do definitely not occur at this place. So at least it needs to be somehow sophisticated to exclude these things. And one more question about the Catalogue of Life China. How is the taxonomic backbone related to the Catalogue of Life, the World Catalogue of Life? Is there any relationship, or is it exactly the same backbone, or how is it handled?
Colin, if you could answer that question, because I don't know myself. So.
You don't have a separate checklist?
It is a completely separate.
But do you have it as a checklist for backbone? Do you use Catalogue of Life China to build backbone taxonomy? Or extended Catalogue of Life?
For the extended one, yes, but only on species. So we don't, for the next session, but we don't integrate higher taxa really much because that's going to be confusing.
So Colin cannot hear us. Can you hear me, Colin? No. Okay. I think we need to redirect that question for the Oxford Abstracts chat instead. Can you speak?
Halfway, Marcus already answered the question, so it's not really directly related, or it's not using the same backbone as I understood. Like, if you don't know, I guess it's not.
Well, we have an API and they use our data for something, so I don't know how they update the backbone itself.
So there's a lot of discussion going on in the chat, but I will make sure to post that in the Oxford Abstract chat and we can continue it there.
Yeah. So we switch to the next one. We're a bit behind time. Michael Dodd is talking about the iSpot species dictionary update that he did.
There we're talking about updating species dictionaries on iSpot with the help of the user community and checklist bank. iSpot is a citizen science platform that helps anyone to identify and learn about observations they make with the help of a user community. It was set up to produce a new generation of naturalists and help with biological recording. Species dictionaries are a vital part of iSpot. They link together all observations of a taxon on all parts of the system. They link together other information about the taxon from elsewhere, such as by Wikipedia and from GBIF and NBN. They obtain data from those and show maps. Why did species dictionaries change? Taxonomy is always changing. New taxa are being discovered. Various parts of the taxonomy are moved about and combined into different overall trees. Species move around the globe, and so regional floras can change. And the rate of change is particularly fast now with DNA. So first of all, we matched our dictionary to the Catalogue of Life dictionary using Checklist Bank. Checklist Bank has many dictionaries on there. You can add your own. But in this case, we use the up-to-date, most recent Catalogue of Life dictionary, and we asked it to match our dictionary to that one. And that produced a very good match, but there were some items that didn't match, even though we knew they should. So we tried our own matching for those ones using the species code, and for those that didn't work, we tried matching on taxon name. So some of the things problems we encountered, some dictionaries use different levels in the hierarchy. Some use subphylums or suborders or whatever, and others don't. Recent taxonomies have had many virus kingdoms. Are they really kingdoms? What level should they be put at? And that's problems there. And in the case of iSpot, we also had to match up each taxon with our top level group. And this meant, so it was a manual process for millions of taxa. So to sort it out, we wrote out the full taxonomic hierarchy and then sorted. And then that allowed us to put our top level group against the taxa in Catalogue of Life. I mean, that there were a few little issues there, but in broad terms, that worked. And then there were still taxa where even after Catalogue of Life and our matching processes, they still didn't match up. And so we asked the community to help with that. And the information they checked was the spellings. Was there simply a spelling difference? I mean, the computer doesn't know how to sort that out, but the people, real people do. Were there pseudonym issues? And there were whole species groups which are not present in the current dictionary, but were present in other dictionaries. And some of the problems we found were fed back to the experts in taxon groups at Catalogue of Life, so they could be corrected. So, I mean, I asked the community, and I got a number of volunteers, but some dropped out because they thought it was this task was too difficult. In fact, it is difficult, but so they dropped out, or it's too much responsibility. I mean, I actually did check what they'd done, but they thought it was too responsible. And there was a fairly annoying group who did the work, but they produced an output which is not in a suitable format. So that was another issue. And then I checked the things and then and dealt with groups where there's no volunteers. So once the dictionary was all matched up, then all those changes had to be propagated throughout the site. And most of these sites are have to exist for long periods. So we've been going since 2009, and the program has changed several times. And updating is a very complex process, so there's has to be a lot of notes produced. And we asked the community to test before it's released. And that in itself is a very tricky process because there may only be a few small errors and there are millions of identifications and links to check. So that's quite a tricky process. This particular dolphin observation just shows that the number of levels in the hierarchy can be quite different. So the taxonomic breadcrumb trail, in one case, there's only a few levels from Animalia down to the genus, whereas in other cases, there are many, many levels. So this is a note just for some of the nuts and bolts of how some of the things worked. We had to reformat the data that came from Catalogue of Life into a format that we could build the tree from. And that's very important, so you can get to any point in the tree very quickly in computing terms and not have to spend ages going up and down to each position. So the community on iSpot find taxonomic issues all the time. It's not only when they're digging the dictionary. For example, here there are several entries for heterohelix, ivy, and some of these may well be errors in the overall dictionary that Catalogue of Life or NBN or whatever are using, and they may come up from the much lower level, from the plant people, and moved up the levels. So it would be good if we could address those errors at a lowest level as possible, so that they're not propagated up and have to be dealt with many times. And the community have great difficulty knowing which version of heterohelix to choose. So that can be, if we can sort out a lot of those dead ends and duplication, that can be very useful. When I first sort of started with iSpot, 2009. I thought that it would be good to have a live dictionary, so that a lot of these problems would go away. But there's so many technical difficulties that it's not happened. But if it did happen, it would allow data to move much easier and quicker, and potentially have much more up-to-date dictionaries. So in summary, species dictionary is key to all parts of the site. Updating the dictionary is a very complex process, and it requires a lot of working together of the programmers, the curator, the community, and the community can really help as long as they're given enough guidance. OU has been involved in citizen science for many years, and this is just an example of some of the projects we've done. And thanks to everyone, particularly the citizen science community.
Thank you, Mike. We have a few minutes if there are any questions. Mike is online as far. Doesn't seem so. No. Then I would suggest just to go ahead with the next one. Or you have one?
Hi, Mike. So regarding whether issues found on GBIF can be reported directly to Catalogue of Life or NBN, right now we don't have. Well, we do make sure that the feedback for GBIF data gets directed to Catalogue of Life, but we are also looking into whether we can streamline this better, especially for when the extended Catalogue of Life or the becomes the backbone in GBIF eventually. And I think actually that data from NBN does get directly directed to NBN if you use the feedback button of the species page, but I need to check that if you're familiar with that one. We have like a small speech bubble in the top right corner of GBIF where if you're on a record, if you click that, for the publishers that do share a contact, that will then make sure that the content of that issue you report gets directed to the person they supplied in that contact information. I hope this makes sense. Sorry.
Yes, well, that sounds very, very useful. So I asked this question earlier in the session, and the person mentioned what was it? Forgotten the name of the anyway, he gave an answer, and if you click on that, you have to log in first, and the citizen scientists, as soon as they see another login, they're not very happy. So making it as easy as possible would be good.
Yeah, okay, good. That's good feedback. Thank you. There's a question from Olaf as well. What would be the best way to resolve taxonomic gaps through citizen science? What works and what does not work?
Well, we found a number of gaps of common species that were on Catalogue of Life, the version we had, and are now missing. So the users that they're always spotting these things, and if we had the best, we had a way of feeding that back, and also keeping the community up to date to say to explain how difficult a process it is, so that they're not complaining to us and saying why are shield bugs not in there at the moment, and explain to them that actually updating that the shield bugs and all the branches above and things may be a very difficult process, and that they will be dealt with in due course. That will be useful.
Right. Thank you, Mike. Thanks. We'll come to our last talk from Mette Lund from the European Environment Agency about how they're using Catalogue of Life.
Thank you for the invitation to speak about the work with species names at the European Environment Agency. My name is Mette Lund and I work in the Biodiversity and Nature Group as a data and information systems expert. The European Environment Agency is an agency set up by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. The EEA provides objective, reliable and comparable information at the European level about the state of the environment. We also assist the European Commission to implement the EU environmental legislation in EU member states, as well as informs European citizens about the state and outlook of Europe's environment. The knowledge network, the IONET, is the EEA's main partner and brings together 32 member countries and 6 cooperating countries. At the European Environment Agency, we collect data and manage data flows, for example, under the EU Birds and Habitats Directive. We compile and distribute EU and European-wide datasets to stakeholders and to the public. Our main products, which include species information, is, for example, the report on the state of nature, which is released every 6 years. We also provide datasets on species conservation status and population trends as reported by EU member states. We have datasets on habitat types defined partly from species composition. We have datasets on protected sites with lists of species, also European red lists of species and of habitat types, which include species lists. And we have also dataset on invaded alien species as reported by EU member states. We also prepare indicators, for example, on farmland birds or grassland butterflies. At the European Environment Agency, we host the European Nature Information System, also called UNIS. It is a database that brings together the data we collect and host from the different databases into 3 interlinked modules on species, habitat types, and protected sites. What is unique about this database is that it is possible to see for certain species in which areas they might be designated, also in which habitat types they may occur. It is possible to see for the habitat types which species may define them, and in which protected areas these habitat types may be designated, or from the protected sites to see which species and habitat types are on the designation for the particular site. We have around 50,000 species names, unique names with UNIS ID in the database, more than 7,000 habitat types, and more than 160,000 protected sites, Natura 2000, nationally designated areas, and also emerald. At the EEA, we have several challenges when working with species information. The scientific names in legal texts are often not precise and most of the time outdated, and we need to follow the same species concept through time in order to be able to improve their conservation status. Old names must stay resolvable. Countries may have their own interpretation of species concepts, and therefore we maintain lists of species codes and species names across the EU and Europe that are used for reporting under the Birds and Habitats Directive and also for the Berne Convention. We see that countries may report species under different names for the same data collection, which results in inconsistent naming in the European databases and which makes it more than difficult to assess the sufficiency of the Natura 2000 and emerald networks. We also see habitat types described by vegetation communities and abiotic factors. These lists of species must also be resolvable over time. Finally, we have deliverables from EU-funded projects, also using different taxonomies. All in all, keeping track of names belonging to a species concept over time is a big challenge. I would like to show here an example of how we work with an outdated name, now a synonym, in the legal text. The species name Triturus cristatus carolini is mentioned in the EU Habitats Directive Annex 2 and Annex 4 and in the Berne Convention Annex 1. We compile the information and show it under the currently valid name using Catalogue of Life as a reference. So to the right-hand side in the slide, you see the valid name, and there we add all the other information we have for the species name, whether it is reported under a synonym or under the currently valid name, EU conservation status, the EU threat status, the protection, number of Natura 2000 sites, preferred habitats, etc., etc. I would like to mention here some of the advantages that we see from using Catalogue of Life and Checklist Bank. For us, it is a single point of taxonomic reference. We can match our names against curated lists from expert communities in the Checklist Bank. At the EA, we don't have taxonomic expertise. We may have it among some of our partners for certain species groups, but definitely not for all the species groups that we have to cover. It is also of high importance to us to have stable global identifiers, as we have now with the Catalogue of Life ID. So we have a unique reference across time that we can refer to when we discuss certain species concepts with our stakeholders. We are also looking forward to the extended checklists that I believe will come in 2024, which will improve further the handling of names originating from legal instruments. We have there also typos, incorrect names, groupings, aggregations, and this needs to be resolvable also through time. We use the checklist bank APIs for the work with names in the UNIS database. We receive the new species names from various sources, as I already explained, and these are imported to the UNIS database through FME workspace. We assign UNIS concept ID and the UNIS species name ID through this process. We need this UNIS species name ID as we have to maintain a number of strange concepts coming from the reporting that are not really taxonomical units, but rather constructions to facilitate reporting. Then we have two processes, one ad hoc. Whenever we get new species names, we request the Catalogue of Life ID and the higher taxonomy for new species names. This is also happening through an FME workspace. And then more recent work is that we would like to annually synchronize all UNIS species names for an updated name status. This is happening through Jupyter notebooks, as this is now seen as more flexible as the FME workspaces. There are more freedom to use different libraries, for example Panda, and it's possible to iterate over the whole dataset. It is important for us to have information about the status of the names in the UNIS database, as we should always show the species attributes that we collect on the valid name and not on the synonym under which the information might have been collected. The UNIS database is available online. It is disseminated through Discodata EEA Europa EU, which is an SQL Server REST endpoint, where for developers it might be interesting to query, database managers might be interesting to query the database directly. This is table views that are pushed to the Discodata, displayed on Discodata. So it's not the UNIS, the entire UNIS database, but selected views. We visualize the UNIS database on the UNIS website, which is unfortunately now getting very old. It is a Java application, and we can no longer maintain the application. It will be retired within the foreseeable future, probably within the next year. And we are migrating the information to the Biodiversity Information System for Europe, also called BIS. The first package of information related to Natura 2000 is already moved to BIS, or available from BIS, and you can see selected links from this page. Before closing, I would like to acknowledge the support and great work over the past 10 years from Mihai Ivascu from ODWeb, and in more recent years also from Jose Gonzalez from Tracasa. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Annemette. She's online. If there are any questions, we're having a few minutes left. It's the last one anyway. Please.
Hi, I'm Jerome from Taiwan. I'm also working in a government institute that needs a lot of work on using biodiversity data to provide for our colleagues on reporting and stuff. And I'm very interested in the way you talked about the concept IDs of the species concept ID. Did I get it right? And I'm curious, can you tell us more about how you, I mean, like, how is it used? What is it? What is the relationship between the concept ID and the species name ID, or even how is it updated with the co-ID or the co-system? Because we tried somehow to do a similar thing. It's like the species concept ID, but I'm not sure if I'm thinking as the same thing as you. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Can you confirm that you hear me?
Yes.
We hear you very well, yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So indeed, well, this is really very challenging. For many years, we maintained only a UNIS ID, a UNIS name ID, but we realized also in discussions with Olaf Banki and Markus Döring and the colleagues from Catalogue of Life and GBIF that, and also from the Swedish Syntaxa that you might have heard of and might be interesting for you to see how they work. That they developed a concept ID which made it possible for them through time to actually consider the names an attribute and not the actual species, because there's this a confusion that we often have if we identify I hate to call a species an object, but if we identify the object, the natural creature in space with a name, because actually we always change the names and that will continue. So we need to have an ID that identifies the creature, the object, instead of and then we need to link the names that we assign to this object to describe it with an ID as well. So we need a double system, and I believe that that's for Markus to explain if how they are handling this in GBIF, but and in Catalogue of Life, the checklist bank. But it's very challenging, and maybe we should continue elsewhere. But from EA side, what we learned a lot from the DIN taxa, where they actually created some reports back in the day, and maybe we can share them. But maybe there are some more recent work that Markus and Olaf can refer to.
Thank you so much.
Well, we can probably have a whole session now on just that topic, but it's a very big question. So I don't know, I guess we can continue on the abstracts chat for longer discussions, but DIN taxa indeed is a very good place, I think, to look at. It's also concepts, for example, when you can't identify exactly one species, but it might be just two, that you have kind of ways to grasp the concept of two species together, that you have, they're doing these kinds of things. And I don't know, there's good discussions, I think, here available in the room all over the place if you want to have a discussion over dinner somewhere. Yeah, I mean, we're done with the session, but we can just do a post session. I think it's the last, is it? The recordings. Oh. You want to? Okay. I didn't register for bingo, so I wasn't aware. There's a red.
I just have a quick question. I can answer it separately. It was just to know how stable and the Catalogue of Life identifiers. Their name identifiers and the state.
Before people leave, remember we continue this session tomorrow as well. There is a second session, so we can maybe also continue some discussions there.